Welcome to the programme. I'm Shuli Ghosh. This is the Al-Jazeera News Hour. Israel started this war 22 days ago. Now it appears ready to end it on its own terms. Israel's Security Cabinet is meeting in the coming hours and is widely expected to vote in a unilateral ceasefire in Gaza. That means it doesn't need to make any agreements with Hamas and effectively sidelines the Egyptian plan for a truce. But for now, the Israeli onslaught continues. 1,200 people are dead and Gaza lies in ruins. We'll be live in Israel and Egypt. Well, let's begin inside the war zone with Ayman Mohyeddin. And Ayman, let's start with the tragic happenings overnight, the bombing of a UN school in which 2 young boys died.
Well, Shuli, it is a long list of what the United Nations is describing as serious violations and possible war crimes by the Israeli military against the United Nations and against the civilian population here really at large. When you look at what has happened over the course of the past 22 days, the UN facility, the UN compound going up in flames, at least 3 different UN schools with very deadly incidents, and 1 UN school that was also hit but without any casualties there. Certainly a great cause of concern for people. In fact, I'm hearing there was just yet another explosion behind us, and you can see the smoke rising as a result of that, Shuli. It is an indication that the military operation still very much going throughout the course of the day. In fact, Jabalia and the northern parts, as you can see our camera pointing to, have been the scene of some intense shelling. But for more on the day's developments, here's my colleague Imran Khan with this report.
This is the 3rd UN shelter to be hit, this time in Beit Lahia. It was sheltering hundreds of refugees. Some of them had already fled violence several times. They came here seeking protection that was supposed to be guaranteed under the Geneva Convention. The UN says it cannot trust the Israeli army anymore.
I have no confidence whatsoever in their assurances on the basis of their track record. You know, we have failed again 2 more small children, 5 and 7 years old. We cannot restore their life, but we have to restore to Gaza now the rule of law. All of these deaths of innocent women, men and children, they have to be accounted for.
That accountability may not come soon. Israel's attack on 1 shelter killed over 40 people. It said that fighters were using the shelter as cover, a claim it's not yet proved. The funeral for the victims of that attack will be remembered in Gaza for a long time to come. Israel, however, continues its raids, and this is the result. A mother and her 5 children laid to rest in a morgue. Israel's war against Hamas once again claiming civilian lives. And now the acting head of the World Health Organization warns that Gaza also faces a health crisis.
Of course, we've got a situation now where there are growing environmental hazards. Sewage and water particularly, wounded in some places, dead bodies possibly under rubble in some places, garbage not being collected. All the ingredients are there for serious disease outbreaks if there's not urgent action taken.
All of this goes on as talks of a ceasefire by Israel continue. But after 22 days under fire, Gazans worry that any talk is just that. Imran Khan, Al Jazeera.
Ayman, of course, we're waiting to find out what will happen at the Israeli Security Cabinet meeting later on tonight. But people in Gaza must be hoping against hope that there will be a ceasefire of some sort.
Well, absolutely, Shuli. In fact, it has been the concern on everyone's mind here that some way the aggression against the Palestinian people, as they see it, has to come to an end. And whether that is in the form of a ceasefire, or whether it's in the form of international intervention, or whether it's in the form of Israel just simply feeling it has done all that it can do and withdraw. At the end of the day, the Palestinian civilian population is bearing the brunt of the 22 days of war. And over the course of these 22 days, we have ventured out and spoken to Palestinian people about a whole host of issues, from diplomatic initiatives to ceasefire to the international reaction. And there's no doubt that they're very opinionated about this particular issue in the coming hours, whether or not a ceasefire or any kind of halt in this operation will take into effect. And here's what Palestinians had to say about that.
We are not seeing anything on the ground to suggest that there will be peace. There are still airstrikes, and even during the lull, they continue. So neither in humanitarian terms, nor in terms of fighting, have we seen anything get better.
There is no such thing as diplomatic solution when it comes to the Israelis. They may talk about it, but it means nothing.
Diplomatic efforts going on now in the Arab world and in Israel and the United Nations are all just ideas. All we see here are airstrikes, destruction and death. They're trying to pacify the people with talks of peace, but the sounds of fighter jets are louder.
I hope that a political solution will be found. I hope to God it comes soon, because our lives are getting more difficult.
I mean, a lot of hope there for some kind of resolution. A lot will depend on what Hamas's reaction will be.
That's correct, Shuli, and depending on the announcement, there's really a few possible ways this can go. Obviously, we know that no clear agreement has been achieved between Hamas through Egypt with Israel, and certainly the position theirs has been is that if there is no agreement to take place or no kind of truce, then Hamas and all the other Palestinian factions have a right to continue to resist what they see as both the aggression against the Palestinian people over these 22 days, an 18-month illegal siege as they see it, and a 41-year-old occupation. So those three things, in the eyes of Hamas and in the eyes of all the Palestinian factions, is a legitimate right for them to continue to fight on if Israel is to announce some sort of unilateral ceasefire and ultimately withdraw its troops. The question all is going to be in the details, whether or not Israel does announce this unilateral truce or ceasefire. How will it then go about removing its soldiers from the ground or on the ground? Does this allow them the right to continue to close the crossings in what many have described illegal as collective punishment? And will Israel continue to use military force as it has over the past 20 days? And in the eyes of Hamas, all three of those, unless they are addressed in some kind of comprehensive agreement or initiative, will allow them to continue, as they have said as much, to fight on in what they see as their resistance and defiance of this aggression. Shuli.
Okay, Ayman, good to talk to you. Thank you for that. Ayman Mohyeddin in Gaza there. Let's go to Alan Fisher, who's in southern Israel on the border with Gaza. Alan, let's talk about the possibility of this unilateral action. What's the thinking behind that on the Israeli side?
Well, there are two reasons for it, Shuli. First of all, internally it will play well, and remember, Israel is just 3 weeks away from an election. They'll be able to turn around and say, we did not do a deal with Hamas. There was no agreement with a group the Israelis regard as terrorists, with a group, of course, that still in its constitution calls for the extinction of the Israeli state. So the thought is that they will be able to say there was no handshake, no picture opportunity, nothing that anyone could tie us to and say that was a deal with Hamas. And externally, it means that they're not tied into any timetable. Therefore, they will decide when the troops are pulled out of Gaza. They will decide when the arrangements on the border are good enough to stop smuggling that the crossings will open. They will decide when the troops come back across the border from Gaza into Israel itself. That is what they are going to do. That's how they're going to spin it if there is a unilateral declaration, and we're expecting that to happen. Certainly we have senior officials from the government saying that is what's likely to happen. We have Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, the Defence Minister Ehud Barak and the Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni addressing the nation after the 12-person security cabinet meets in Tel Aviv in the next few hours. So it looks as if Israel, who started this war 3 weeks ago today, is going to end it on its own terms.
Now, Israel has said all along that its main concern is the security of its citizens. Does it think that is now safeguarded, particularly in the light of this agreement with the US on security arrangements?
I think their first concern, of course, was to deal a severe blow to Hamas's infrastructure, the group behind the rocket firing into southern Israel. And there's no doubt that a massive blow has been served to Hamas. Not a fatal blow by any means, but certainly a massive blow. They've targeted Hamas buildings, Hamas infrastructure, the places where rockets are fired from, Hamas personnel, as we saw the other day with the death of the deposed former Interior Minister. And of course, they have attacked the tunnel network, which leads from Israel into Gaza, and also, more specifically for the Israelis, from Egypt into Gaza. And overnight, there were 70 tunnels attacked by the Israeli Air Force. So even with the countdown going towards this possible ceasefire, they are still targeting Hamas infrastructure. So given all of that, given the deal they've reached with the Americans, I suspect that Israel believes that they have concluded a very successful